Hello everyone, Jonty here. Welcome to my series of short videos where I hope to answer in less than 5 minutes those business questions which everybody else seems to know the answer to, but you're afraid to ask just in case you look a little bit silly. This video is about cost of sales, and if you don't know how cost of sales fits into the whole kind of profit and loss thing, have a look at the video which is perched over my left shoulder and click on the overlay, and it should take you straight through to that video which explains how cost of sales fits into all the other things that make up the profit and loss account. The first thing we need to know is that cost of sales is the money you spend on all the stuff that you need to make the stuff that you sell. So if you don't need to spend any money to sell something, then you probably won't have any cost of sales, and you won't have cost of sales in your profit and loss account. For example, I'm a consultant, I sell my time is free, so I don't have any cost of sales. If I suddenly decide to start making benches, then I need wood and screws and all that kind of stuff, so I will have cost of sales. The second thing is that I want to point out is that cost of sales includes stock, and stock is one of those things that sometimes causes a few problems, so I'm going to try and explain how stock fits into cost of sales in my 5 minutes. And I'm sorry, but there's nothing I can do about it. We're going to have to do some sums, so I'd lay off the beer until you've watched the video. Now, why am I singling out cost of sales for a video all of its own? Well, we need to understand that cost of sales is a weird kind of lens that you need to look through when you're making decisions about spending money on all the other things that you need to allow the business to exist, like marketing and rent and all that kind of stuff. So is it possible to do cost of sales, to explain cost of sales in less than 5 minutes? Let's find out. Here we go. Here's a profit and loss account of a real business, which those of you that saw my previous video will recognize. I'm going to simplify this because I find these figures a little bit difficult to kind of manipulate and work with. And what we end up with is the 5 elements of the profit and loss account that we are familiar with. And of course, in this video, what we're concerned with is cost of sales. Now, cost of sales can contain all sorts of things, but what we need to remember is that what cost of sales actually are is all the money that you shell out on all the stuff that you need to make the stuff that you sell. And one of the things that cost of sales quite often includes is stock, and stock is one of those things that some people have a problem with, but actually what stock is purchases that you haven't used yet, so purchases that are still sitting on the shelf waiting to be used. And the first thing you might see in a cost of sales, in your cost of sales, is opening stock. And what opening stock is purchases that you made last year, in your last financial year, that are still sitting on the shelf ready for you to use at the beginning of this financial year, so you can use them to make your products this year. And of course, in the year you'll need to make more purchases, and you probably need to spend out on wages for people to make your stuff. And at the end of the year, you probably will not have used all your purchases, so some of those purchases will be sitting on the shelf ready for you to use in your next financial year, so you can use those to make stuff next year. And then if you add all those things up and take the bits away that you need to take away, you will end up with the figure of cost of sales that we saw in the original profit and loss account. So this is where things start to get a little bit intense, because I'm going to have to start flinging quite a few figures at you here to try and explain what's going on. Because logic tells me that if I spend £1 on expenses, which are my costs of existing, in other words, those costs I have to spend before I've actually sold anything, or whether or not I sell anything, if I spend £1 on those things like marketing and rent and all that kind of stuff, then surely I only need to spend or to sell £1 to cover that. But this is where cost of sales raises its ugly head and it distorts the picture a little bit. And let me try and explain to you why. I'm going to make the figures a little bit easier to play with. And I'm going to show you what's going on here. Every time I sell something for £4, which is what this profit and loss account is telling me, it cost me £2.50 to make it, which leaves me £1.50 to spend on my expenses, which are my costs of existing, as I just said just now. Or looking at it another way, every time I spend £1.50 on my expenses, I have to sell something for £4 to pay for it, and that doesn't leave me any profit.
In other words, the cost of making what I sell is eating up 62.5% of what I sell it for. It's sucking out 62.5% of that sale cost before it's got anywhere near me thinking about spending money on expenses or let alone making any net profit. Now what I've done is I have worked really hard and I have reduced my cost of sales down to £120,000, which is only 30% of my sales costs. I might have done that by putting in automation or negotiating with my suppliers. But now what is happening is much less money is being sucked away from my sales costs. And I appreciate that other stuff goes on, like we've got to maintain quality and all that sort of stuff. But in this instance, let me show you what's happening. Now every time I sell something for £4, it now only costs me £1.20 to make it, which means I now have £2.80 to spend on expenses, which haven't changed. Or looking at it another way, now if I spend £1.50 on expenses and I sell something for £4, I'm left with £1.30 profit. Now I flung a lot of figures at you there, so I hope they're not running around your head too much. But if you could just remember one thing, and that's controlling your cost of sales is vital, is absolutely critical if you're a manufacturing business or indeed any business that has cost of sales. Because what it means is your life is just that much easier. Because any money you spend on expenses, you need to sell less to cover. So that's it. Thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it. I'd really appreciate it as well if you could subscribe or give me a like. There is a rather fetching photograph in the top right hand corner there, which you can click on and look at my previous video. My next video is going to be about a little number called break-even point, so I hope to see you then.